welcome to the Michael and Mom Talk Cancer podcast. Thank you guys so much for listening and joining us today. We're truly honored, and it's a blessing to have you guys here today.
Thank you so much. This is our first episode.
Yes, and the whole idea of this podcast is to really just spread awareness and talk about our journey through cancer and what we've learned. And this first episode here mainly is going to be talking about diagnosis, how I was diagnosed, what I was feeling like before, and yeah.
Yeah, and even if you're not someone that's been through cancer, we just feel like this story has been compelling for a number of reasons. So many of the lessons we've learned, and we feel like sharing this journey, we've been sharing it on social media, but we feel like a podcast, we can get a little bit more in depth. And we've had so much support and love, and we want to share that also with you.
So yes, before I was diagnosed with cancer on July 14th, I was a windsurfer, I was a surfer, I was actually on the Olympic development team for windsurfing, and I had traveled the world windsurfing. I had done multiple competitions, I was super healthy, I was an athlete, I did not eat anything insane to make me get cancer, in case you guys were wondering. Very healthy, yeah. And I'd say when I started to feel off or a little like of the symptoms as before was kind of when COVID had started, I'd say in March and April, and things had really shut down in Miami where I live. And I just remember I would go to my friend's house, we'd do little workouts because they were safe. This was during COVID. We couldn't go to a gym. We couldn't go to the beach. We couldn't go anywhere. So it was hard for me to keep up with them. And that was just weird for me because I was usually the one pushing them. I was usually the one with the energy. I was the one helping my friend, We were helping each other, but I was helping motivate him to work out every day with me. And I was feeling more tired than him. So something was a little off.
I really thought it was because of COVID. I was worried at first he had COVID, but he had none of the other symptoms. He didn't have a sore throat. He didn't have coughing. We spoke to a doctor, and she did not think it was COVID. At that time, getting tested was a little bit harder. I really thought it was just he was missing the beach. That's really what I thought.
Yeah, that's what I thought too. And, we did a telehealth via Zoom with our family pediatrician, and at the time, I was 19. I am 20 now, by the way. But yes, pediatrician, even though I was 19, she sees us basically till we're 21. And I just remember her on the Zoom being like, your symptoms aren't that bad. You're just tired. Like, you look good.
She did offer to do a blood test at the time, but...
it was 20 minutes from our house. It was during COVID. We were like, I'd rather just stay in. And if things get worse in a few weeks, sure, why not? So during those few weeks, I was like, I really want to surf or do something with my friends. And a beach had just opened up in North Florida called New Smyrna Beach. So my friends and I and my brother, we decided to get an Airbnb, just go there for a few days and surf. And it was amazing. I came home feeling rejuvenated. I had some energy.
He looked back like Michael again. I really believed it was that he missed surfing, being with friends. It was a small group, but I think just being in the ocean, it's always been our healing place. And I felt like he came home and I could see Michael again. He had energy again. Yeah,
and I felt great. And then it only lasted a few days that I felt great because, I went to the gym. The gym's finally opened in Miami. And I remember working out and bench pressing, and then all of a sudden I have to throw up. I run to like the trash can in the gym and I just vomit. And then I realized okay, this is not good. I had to leave. I had to go home. And then I kind of started running a fever a bit. And then it went away the next day, actually. But then, we called our pediatrician, and I was like, I think I'm going to come in for some blood work just because I want to be safe. So I go in for the blood work. I see her in person. It's weird to go somewhere during COVID, but, it was nice to see her. I felt good. I was just a little tired still.
We really thought he had an iron deficiency. I thought maybe I'm a vegetarian. I thought, oh my gosh, I'm giving this kid too many vegetables and not enough protein. That was basically what we were worried about. Something
Yeah.
we started Googling iron. I was giving him dark chocolate and almonds.
Yeah, and I remember I think it was 3 days later, because it was on a Friday, was it?
Yeah.
It was on a Monday that we got the call, and I was actually driving to my friend's house to work out with him and help him move some stuff from his old house to his new house, and his dad was possibly going to pay me $100, so I was like, I'm so down, let's do that. And then midway through the drive, my mom calls me and she says, well, the blood work came back, and not to scare you or anything, but, Valeria, our pediatrician, said we should go, see the specialist at Nicholas Children's Hospital. And I was like, okay, it's fine. I've been dealing with this for a while. Let's just go. I'll turn around. And then tomorrow I'll be back with my friend, and, we'll working out again and doing all that fun stuff.
Yeah, I was surprised to get the call from her. He did the blood test on Friday. On Monday, I had taught in the morning. I'm a music and movement teacher. I taught in the morning, and I get a call from her. I answered it right away, of course. And she said, Ashlee, I really want you to go see this friend of mine. He is a blood specialist, and he's at Nicholas Children's Hospital. And I was like, a blood specialist? What is going on? Are you worried? And she said, I just want you to go see him. He's a great friend of mine. He's wonderful, but I need to call him and make sure that he'll see Michael, because Michael is 19 now, and I'm not sure it is a children's hospital. She said, if not, I have a backup. There's a great guy, that's an adult doctor that I know as well. But she called me back 5 minutes later and said, okay, Dr. D'Angulo, that's the name of the specialist at the children's hospital. Dr. D'Angulo can squeeze you in right now. You need to get Michael and come. And I was like, okay. And it felt definitely like an order, and I needed to follow through and not put this on the back burner. So I called Michael, and we went right away to the hospital, met Dr. D'Angulo.
Mm-hmm. And I remember going into the office, sitting here like, why am I in this office? Like, can't I just get some supplements for what I thought was anemia? And then I go in, I do a blood test, actually a CBC, which is a complete blood count. At the time, I had no idea what that was when he told it to me. But we did that, and the results were a little weird. So he was like, you could stay the night tonight, and we'll do a bone marrow biopsy first thing in the morning.
We were like, stay the night?
Yeah, I was like, I'm not staying the night in a hospital. I would never want to do that in my life. It's terrible. And then we come back the next day for the biopsy, and it turns out you have to be something called NPO, which...
Yeah, at the time we had no idea what NPO meant. So basically, when he told us to come back the next day, he said, all right, I'll see you tomorrow morning, 8 a.m., come NPO. And we're like, okay. In my head, NPO was something like, be on time, don't be late. I had no idea. NPO meant you're not allowed to eat anything for 12 hours before the procedure, which we had no idea. So we're sitting there in the waiting room, and actually Michael hadn't eaten because I got him out of bed, put him in the car. He didn't have any breakfast. We're in the waiting room, and he's like, Mom, I'm hungry. And I said, perfect. I brought you an apple. I give him an apple. He takes a bite of the apple, and the nurse comes rushing in. She's like, no, don't eat the apple. You have to be NPO. And we're like, what's NPO? She said, oh, no, you're not allowed to eat. We had no idea. There have been a lot of acronyms that we have learned recently, CBC, NPO, and there's a lot more coming. But it turned out okay. They ended up just having to wait a few more hours for him to digest that bite of apple, but they did still do the procedure. Mm-hmm. And in the meantime...
I had to get a COVID test. I think this was my first time ever getting a COVID test. And I was so scared because whenever I would get strep throat tests or anything like that, I would end up almost beating up the nurse or doctor who would try to do it on me. I would literally shove people off me. I was not very good at it, so I told her that, and she made me put my hands under my butt so that I wouldn't react or anything. And I didn't react, except I got very teary and coughy because when they do the COVID swab, they go all the way up to your brain and basically swirl it around for 10 seconds. And I was thankful after that because they told me that would be the worst part of my day, because the anesthesia, that's gonna be easy, you're gonna be asleep. And little did I know that was not the worst part of my day.
No, it was
not at all. I remember, the nurse who was actually taking me to the minor procedure suite where I would do the biopsy and get my anesthesia. I asked him, have you ever been under anesthesia? And he said yes. and that it wasn't bad, and you just, you get it, you go to sleep, and the next thing you know, you're awake again, groggy in another room. And that's exactly what happened. I had no idea. I got the anesthesia. I woke up groggy in another room, but this time I woke up groggy in another room with a doctor walking in telling me I have leukemia/lymphoma. And it was just insane that the first time ever at anesthesia, and I woke up feeling weird, and I thought it was some sick joke, and that I was just in a different world. It was just unreal. I had no thoughts besides, I don't even remember him saying anything after that. Like today, a year and a few days later, I don't remember anything besides what you have is treatable. It's a form of leukemia/lymphoma. It's just like a blur.
Yeah, it was actually when they took Michael out, when Andrew, the nurse, took Michael out, I was actually so not worried that I did a live stream. I was still working at the time. I set myself up my computer in the corner and I was training other teachers. And literally I closed my computer, had just finished the live stream. They wheeled Michael back in and I was like, yay, he's back. You look great. I was making fun of him because he was a little groggy. And then Dr. Jangula walks in. And he was a very, even through the mask, you could tell he had a very smiling face. But when he walked in, he did not look smiley. He felt heavy. And he came in, and those were the first words he said. The first thing he said, and I remember it so clearly, was, "This is treatable." And for me, as soon as I heard "this is treatable," I was pretty terrified about what was going to come next. That sounded like big words to me. And he said, leukemia, lymphoma, a form of blood cancer. And it was even a little harder because 4 years before that, my husband, my kid's father, had died from lymphoma. So even hearing those words was definitely very scary for us. The treatable part was good. And within, I guess, a few minutes, they transported Michael up to the 6th floor, which was the oncology floor, to start to get him prepared.
Yeah, to start the whole process. And it was so fast. It was like in the span of one day, I'm healthy, and then all of a sudden I have to spend the next week in the hospital getting a port placed in, getting multiple blood transfusions, having doctors and nurses come in every few hours to ask me questions about how I feel or what's going on. And I'm like this in this room, and people don't even know my official diagnosis. So all these residents, all these doctors are all coming in asking how I feel. What do I feel? Am I bruising easily? And it was just so weird because I felt like already in the beginning I was like some experiment in the hospital. Nobody knew what I had and what was going on, and I had to spend weeks before I got my initial diagnosis, and I had to spend a week in the hospital, and then I went home and had to wait from July 14th until August 3rd to get my official diagnosis of hepatosplenic T-cell lymphoma.
It was, that first week in the hospital, we were very appreciative because after they let us know that Michael had leukemia, he said, we're going to place a PICC line right away, which if you don't know, a PICC line is basically, it's kind of like an IV, although it usually stays in for months at a time. And it's to receive chemotherapy or other medications. The other option was a port, but he said in such short notice, I don't think I can get a port placed right away. But he started talking to us, which we're very grateful for, found out Michael was a surfer, found out he was a beach kid. And he said, you know what, I'm going to do my best to get you a port because the benefits of a port is it can get wet. You have surgery, so it's placed under the skin. It's a little bit more complicated in the beginning to get it placed, but once it's set, your skin heals. You can actually take a shower, you can get it wet. It interferes less with your daily life. So we were very grateful that they scheduled him the next day. As Michael said, he had the surgery for the port placement. That recovery was tough, and probably because the cancer was kicking in, although at the time they didn't know that. And even though they didn't know what kind of leukemia Michael had, they did go ahead. Dr. D'Angelo started him on steroids, knowing that would be, no matter what kind of leukemia or lymphoma, that was pretty much protocol, was to use steroids. The fact that he didn't wait saved Michael's life. Now we can say that with a lot of gratitude. So we spent a week with him basically just on steroids and recovering from the port surgery, went home, and it took another 2 weeks to get his official diagnosis. And it was the 2 weeks of, as Michael said before,
It was really challenging mentally because there was one doctor who kind of said, well, it could be a virus, but then Dr. Dangula was like, no, you have cancer. And then I didn't know what it was. And cancer is leukemia, lymphoma, it's so broad. It could be, like years of treatment, or it could be a few months of treatment, or it could be this, or it could be that. So I couldn't put my mind on anything and, have a set idea for what my future was going to be like because I just did not know. And those 2 weeks at home, were so just weird because, I didn't know what I was supposed to do. How was I supposed to cope with this? I was really weak from the port surgery. I tried to work out and I could only lift like a 6-ounce can of literally like corn. I remember curling a 6-ounce can of corn because I was so weak. Like, it was insane. I was already so weak from one hospital stay. Like, I was thinking, if I have to go through chemo and all this, like, how am I going to do it? And I had so many questions. And then I remember when we finally came in on August 3rd and got the diagnosis, it was like, I just remember crying in his office, and I started to sweat a bit because, he told me what I had, and it's called hepatosplenic T-cell lymphoma, and all I remember him telling me is, I'm going to have to go through 2 to 6 21-day rounds of chemotherapy to get myself into remission as soon as possible, and then I would need a bone marrow transplant. And that was the only way that I was going to survive, was if I got into remission soon, and then was put into even deeper remission, and then had a bone marrow transplant. Like, that was the only thing. And I had no idea really what the future was for me. And it was just a bunch of, nerves and a bunch of anxiety. But I remember one thing I just told myself was that, this is something that I'm going to get through. I'm going to get through this. I had that day, something in my mind it just swapped around. Like, I went from, focusing on working out and trying to be a surfer and do all of these things to, just, okay, I just need to fight for my life. I need to make it through this because this isn't something that is going to take me down. I'm too young. I'm too healthy. I have too much of a purpose, to fulfill, that I need to, stay positive and strong. And I think the biggest thing for that was, being treated in this hospital and being able to be with my mom and be able to see my brother and sister was one of the biggest things that really got me through that diagnosis and through those first weeks, really.
We were actually blessed with being at a pediatric hospital, because during COVID we've heard stories of other people that have been Michael's age and had to be in adult hospitals and having to be alone. And we were grateful because at a pediatric hospital they allowed one parent to be with him, and actually they allowed 2 parents, so it would be me and his big brother. We were able to come visit him and be with him, and I stayed with him the whole time. But it definitely was the diagnosis itself. It was kind of a foreshadowing of this last year, because I really did see Michael and the whole family come together and make this flip. And he went from a kid that had never spent the night in a hospital ever in his life to a kid that spent a week in the hospital, and someone that was terrified of needles and terrified of anything unknown, and had to be faced. And it's been a big lesson for him this past year. And it started with that initial diagnosis and all the questions. But we have a lot more to share with you about the next thing, which was chemotherapy.
But the bone marrow transplant, all of that, and how much it really changed me. And
this was just a little intro to let you know how Michael found out, how we found out.
Yes. And this is just where we're going to be sharing these episodes, and where we really just want to spread awareness about this and really just be able to help others who are going through something, and really just motivate and inspire through this story of mine and ours together, and really just how important it is to have somebody you love next to you. And that's the whole point of why it's Michael and Mom Talk Cancer, and not just Michael Talks Cancer, because I feel that the caregiver in any situation like this is just as important or more important than the person going through it themselves. And that's really why I want to do this podcast, is to just express that.
And to thank everyone and to share this, because we really do feel like, as I said earlier, that this has touched a lot of people and we have learned so many lessons, and a huge one is how important it is to have love between each other, with our whole family, with the support system that we have that we're so grateful for. So we hope that you're going to tune in the next time.
So yes, thank you guys so much for listening today and being here with us. It really means the world to us, and we're so grateful. So once again, goodbye from your host. I'm Michael.
And I'm Ashlee.
And thank you for listening. We'll see you on the next episode.